Hello, everybody. I'm John Denny with the TELUS Corporation, and this is Xacta Tidbits. This is our controls implementation part 3. And in this part, we are going to be learning how to export our controls implementation into a spreadsheet, how to manipulate that spreadsheet and put our answers in, and then how to import those answers back into Xacta 360. Now, along the way, I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on how to work with these spreadsheets and how to work with them to make things a little bit more efficient and a little bit faster for your processes so that we don't run into problems when we're trying to import our spreadsheets back in. So let's get started with part number 3. That's all about export and import controls implementation.
All right, so we are in Xacta 360 and we are doing part 3 of our controls implementation. So we're going to start by going directly into our Xacta Tidbits project, and I am going to change my role from the ISM to the ISO. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because if you recall from part 2, we had already set up my controls, and some of those controls were set up against the role of ISO, and that will come into play as we're going through and learning how to work with our spreadsheets. So we're going to go into our controls implementation task and then directly into our controls implementation process step. Now just like in part 1, we are going to be sorting by the control ID. So we're going to sort by control ID. Now before we do anything else, what we want to do is get everything set up for the export of our controls implementation. So we're going to be exporting this and we need to set it up properly. The first thing that we want to do is we are going to only look at our controls. So I am now filtering by my controls, which I have 53 controls that are assigned to me. That was in part 2. I'm also going to remove anything that is inherited because currently I do have some inherited controls like this IR control here, and I want to remove them because we won't be answering inherited controls. The controls implementation for them has already been answered at a common control provider level. So we're going to remove those by using our drop down, just like we learned in part number 1, and we are going to choose system only. So now we are filtered down to just 51 controls. So these 51 controls are assigned to me. These are the things that we need to answer. Now from here, what we're going to do is export our spreadsheet. So we're going to use the More drop down, and we are going to export our controls. Now you can use document marking if you would like. I'm going to document mine as unclassified since I am on an unclassified system. And I'm going to go ahead and click the export button. And this has exported our spreadsheet. Now we're going to pause here briefly so that the spreadsheet can open up. All right, we have our spreadsheet now downloaded and opened. The first thing that we're going to do here is we are going to enable editing. So we're going to click the enable editing. And the next thing that we have to do is we have to unprotect the sheet that we're working with here in order to manipulate the data in here. So from Microsoft Excel, we're going to go up here to Review, and we are going to click on this unprotect sheet here. Now there is no password or anything, so as soon as you click on it, the sheet is now unprotected. Now that we've unprotected the sheet, we need to cover a few very brief rules about working with these spreadsheets. The first rule when working with the spreadsheets is we don't mess with any of these column header titles here. In other words, we don't change the names of them. We don't rearrange the order of the columns. We don't do anything like that. The second thing that we need to be aware of is that anything that's in one of these yellow fields, so we see these yellow fields here, these are static fields that have been received from Xacta 360, and these things should not be edited. That's going to leave us with these white areas, or areas that have no fill color to them, in order to be able to manipulate and work with our spreadsheet. Now currently it's a little difficult to work with this spreadsheet because everything is very wide and very parsed out across the spreadsheet. So we're going to do a little tip and trick here in order to make things a little easier to work with. In Microsoft Excel, what we're going to do is we're going to select everything inside of the spreadsheet. To do that, we're going to click on this arrow right here that's between the column A and the row 1. And when you click on it, it selects the entire sheet. What we're going to do now is we are going to adjust the sizes of things. So I'm going to adjust the size of our rows first. So I'm just going to go to a line here between row 2 and 3, and I'm going to drag this up, and then I'm going to release it. And what that does is that adjusts the size of every row. Now that we've adjusted the size of every row, we're going to reselect our spreadsheet again, and we're going to do the same thing for the columns. We're going to go between column B and C, and we're just going to bring it in very slightly. And now it has adjusted our entire spreadsheet to make things a little bit easier to read and a little easier to work with. Now we did already answer one of our controls here. So we can see here that it has an implementation in here and that its status is planned. Now what we're going to do though is we're going to go through here and we are going to update as many of these controls as we can. As we're going through here, I'm going to point out a few things that we may see along the way. So for our private implementation, this is where we will type in how we implemented the control. How we implemented the control. So that is what would go in there, and we'll just type that in here as well. The public implementation, this column right here, is used only for inherited controls. So we will not use this column at all for anything for public implementation. So what I'm going to do so that I don't want to accidentally type something in the public implementation is I'm going to hide this column so that I don't want to type something in here by accident. So I'm just going to right click on this column and I'm going to click hide. And that's going to move that out of the way. Now the column still exists, it's just hidden from our view. This is going to make working again with our spreadsheet a little bit nicer. So again, here we are. We have our private implementation. This is how we implement the control. And then our status is going to be one of 3 statuses. It's either blank for things that have not been implemented. The other status is implemented, meaning that the control is fully implemented. And then planned would be in anything that is in a planned state. Now I'm going to change this one from a planned to an implemented state. Now, once we put something in as implemented, we have to put in a date here. Now, don't let this column fool you. Where it says expected completion, it is not an expected completion. This is the actual completion date. So we're going to put in here today's date because this is the day that we have implemented this control. And the format that we put this in is month, day, year. Month, day, year. We'll press the enter button and we're just going to do the same for the other control as well. Now you may notice that I left the notes blank. The notes area here is actually used by Xacta 360 in order to indicate different things about a particular control. If we scroll down here a little bit, we can see some of the notes, but probably one of the biggest notes here is we can see that this control here, this IR91 control, was added because we have an overlay present. And this overlay is the intelligence overlay, or Intel A overlay. And because we have this, we have received all of these controls here. Other notes are going to let you know that that none of the areas for this are at a high impact level for whatever it is. That's why you have that control. Others are on here. These are incident controls, and additional control enhancements are not required. And then other ones are all at the low impact level. So because these are at the low impact level, we do have these two controls here. So it's just letting you know kind of a little bit of why you have this. Now, when you are working with these spreadsheets, if you do have something that is similar and you're going to implement it the same way, we can simply copy, and then we can paste through here, and we can paste those results in here. We can also do the same thing for the word implemented here, so we could put the word implemented in. We can also do the same thing for our date. Now, it's important to understand that when you're working with your date, a lot of people like to grab this little square right here and drag it down. But I'm going to show you what happens if you accidentally do this. It starts putting in future dates in here. So you notice that it now goes 12/11, 12/12, 12/13, 12/14, 12/15. That is not the result that we wanted from dragging that down. So don't use that little box to drag down your dates. Instead, do a full copy and then paste it back in there. That way you get the date in there the way it's supposed to be. Now we're going to go ahead and finish out our implementation here. I'm just going to use the same thing here for all of my controls, because that would be the details of how the control was implemented. We're going to just use the same implementation details here for all of the controls as well. So we've got the implementation of everything and the answers. Once we have everything in here, we can go ahead and click the Save button. And this is going to save our spreadsheet so that it is ready for re-import back into our system. So that's how we work with this spreadsheet. The main three areas that we're going to work with, again, private implementation, status, and date. Private implementation, status, date. So we're going to go ahead and pause the video again here, and we're going to get ready to import back in our spreadsheet now that we have it saved. All right, we are now back in our controls implementation inside of Xacta, and we are now ready to import our spreadsheet back in. Now I do want to point out, when we look across here, that the status is blank, right? Not assigned. There's no completion date. There's no private implementation. And if we go through and look at these, just do a random sampling of a few of them here, they're all in that same situation. So what we're going to do here is we are going to import our spreadsheet back in. So we're going to use the More drop-down, and now we're going to choose Import. Once we have Import chosen, we can choose what file that we want to import back in. And I am going to choose the file that we downloaded, which is our controls implementation file, the one that I have worked and saved. Now that I've chosen my file, I'm going to click the import button, and it's going to import the spreadsheet back in. The first thing that it's going to do is validate the metadata. Every file that is downloaded from controls implementation has metadata inside of it. And when we look at the metadata that's contained inside of here, we can see that we have the file name, the folder structure it came from, which project it came from, the process step, when was it exported, when was it last modified, and what is the file size. These are all things that are needed in order for Xacta 360 to make sure that this particular file goes only into this project. You cannot take a controls implementation spreadsheet from a separate project and try to import it into a different project. The metadata will not allow you to do that. So we're going to go ahead and click our import button a second time. The first time was to validate the metadata. The second time is to now import the spreadsheet in. It tells me that 51 of 51 records have been uploaded and updated, and we can now close out. And when we start looking on here, here it is implemented as of this date, how we implemented the control, and all of our controls here are implemented. If I do a quick random sampling, they're all the same across the board. So that's how we work with our spreadsheets when we're doing an export and import. Again, it's important to make sure that we follow along and that we have set up my controls first. This is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of effort in working with your controls. But as you can see, working with the spreadsheets, when we have a lot of things that we have to update at the same time, it is going to make things go faster for us and much easier to work with that spreadsheet. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video of how to work with your spreadsheet and updating your controls implementation. In part 4 that's coming up, we're going to be talking about our supplementary artifacts. So be prepared for part 4 that's coming up. But thanks again for watching, and we'll see you around the AFIC.
For more great content, make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel to get the latest Xacta tidbits.